Welcome to Street Psychology Podcast. Today I have guest Linda Eastburn. We're going to be talking about her new book called Your Way to Power and Success. So, Linda, this is your most recent book. You've written 4 books so far. Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey to writing your books and the current book of Your Way to Power and Success?
Yeah, it's SPI Your Way to Power and Success, and the S.P.I stands for Superpowered Intuition, because I've always been led by my intuitive state. I had a real estate company for many years. What I found was during the building of that real estate business, my intuition was very strong, often giving me insight into things that were way beyond what I should have had information, taking some meditation classes and learning how to develop my mind in a more focused manner, and to be perceptive of what my body was telling me, that gut feeling, as well as my intuition. And I took that kind of to an extreme where I could actually have a dialogue, where I would go into meditation, ask a question, and get a concept of an answer. I wouldn't say it was actually a verbal answer, but it was a knowing, a kind of knowledge that I was aware of. And that was just an extension of what I had been doing with the real estate business up to that point in time. I was a real estate investor. I still am a real estate investor, but there have just been so many things along the way that told me that there was more to this intuition than something simplistic like just a gut feeling or protecting you from some harm of some sort, of course. So I began using that to be able to see opportunities as they were sitting out there in the future. A lot of really interesting and profound things happened. That eventually led me to write my first book and then my second book. This is my 4th book, and it is about the physics portion of what we actually do as humans. Now, a lot of what I do has been identified through the ages, through many writings, but this was something that I wanted to be clear within myself as to what I was actually doing. And it seems that our consciousness is able to get in touch at a very minute level of awareness, maybe a quantum level, you might even call that. And so I worked with a physicist to try to understand what energies might be available that would enable us to have this type of in-depth intuition. And that's where the book SPI Your Way to Power and Success, because it did enable me to build a business. It enabled me to know things that I would not have had knowledge of otherwise. And then I took that and I developed a whole procedure enabling other people to learn the same thing. Now, we know that a lot of the government remote viewers were able to capture this and utilize it. And a lot of people have marked this as something that is not a human skill. I like to think of it as just a skill that we've lost touch with because we become more analytical. I highly utilize that in my work. But I also think that there is this other part of us that we've negated and we don't really use it. So what I did was bring business with the intuition to make a more successful life. And a lot of really successful people use it. They just don't talk about it in the same manner that I do.
Yeah, that journey. So what you said about sometimes that gut feeling and intuition is something that could keep you away from danger and harmful things. But it's also really important to consider how it can inspire you and reassure you to move forward in a positive direction.
Absolutely. A lot of children who grow up in really vulnerable households develop a really keen perception, their intuition. It's there to protect them because they don't want to go home to an environment that is dangerous to them, or they know when to just stay out of someone's way or when to not enter a room. And that's a protective thing. So a lot of people who have this fine-tuned, honed into it, it's been a protective thing, and they found that they can use it for that. Now, I knew a woman once, one of my students, and she described a point where she was driving home one day. It was a road that she was very familiar with. But she got this really strong sensation to slow down, just slow down. She was getting ready to top a hill. And so she was obedient to that feeling. She slowed way down. And as she topped the hill, there was a car accident that had happened just over the hill. She would have gone head on into that collision that had just happened. Yeah, I think a lot of people feel this. They know it's part of their system. They use it when it benefits them. I just took that to a stronger degree where you could use it in everyday life. Every day I go in and do a little meditation to get a feel for my day. What do I need to know about this day? How can I better use my intuition to make my life go more smoothly? What challenges might I meet today that I need to be prepared for that can help you get through your life more easily?
Absolutely. When I hear those two words, I think they go hand in hand. So do you feel like there is a distinct difference between those two? Is that the same concept? Your consciousness is telling you this, or your intuition is telling you that?
I think your consciousness allows you to be aware of what your body sensations are. And intuition does. I know when I began to take this to a different level where I could get that type of communication, it was really where I would feel the truth of a matter was within like my heart energy. It would tell me if I was telling the truth, if this was a real perception, or if this is just something I was making. The way that I teach my students how to identify that type of real impression with intuition is to say the words out loud, say whatever you're perceiving out loud, and then pay attention to how you're responding to it. Because if we just make something up and say an absolute lie, our body responds. Our heart will respond to it. It will tell us that we're telling a lie. Even when we're describing something, I've noticed this so many times. I will try to describe something, and I'm not using the exact words that most efficiently describe it, and I will not agree with that. Let me go back and see if I can find better words to describe it. What's that same process that happens when we are in being more intuitive? If we say the words out loud, or at least for me, if I say the words out loud, I can feel in my body if that's a true statement. And so it's our body that gives us these impressions of intuition, but our consciousness then enables us to relate that to understand it.
Right, absolutely. So going back to that feeling where it can be used as a protective measure, when you decided, I'm going to start following my gut, I'm going to start meditating, get more in touch with my body. So what I'm thinking is the difference between that feeling of protection and the feeling of maybe I'm scared to move forward and to accept this feeling as something good. What do you have to say about that difference?
There is a difference because we're always bringing up our fears and our biases, and all of these things are just, they're embraced inside of us. So we're always bringing those out. I have a fear of height. So whenever I'm standing somewhere and I don't have a protective railing or something, I'm going to be afraid that I'm going to fall or something and plummet to my death. And so that's a genuine fear that I have. But under most circumstances, I'm not going to fall over the edge. I'm not going to plummet to my death. So that fear is a little unnecessary, but it's still there whenever I'm at a high elevation of some sort. And especially if I don't have a railing in front of me or something I can hang on to, something that would prohibit me from tripping and falling. So those fears do protect us, and I think we need to listen to those. But an intuition will often come from something that we can't see, like the woman who was getting ready to top that hill, and she was driving and she got that impression to slow down. There was danger ahead and to slow down. She drove that road every day. She was on her way home from work. So this was a place that she often encountered, and she never had felt that before.
Yeah, and it's this innate thing, right? Almost, it sounds like to me from the universe that happens.
Yeah, I think that we're really very well connected to some kind of a database or whatever that has a lot of information. I think some people would call that God. I think God is bigger than that alone, but I think it's certainly a part of an organization of awareness, the omnipresence of something that is spiritual in nature that we can't see, but definitely we're all connected to it. And I think people who are more aware of their body sensations end up being more intuitive. Some of the most successful individuals on the planet just have that sense when it's time to move forward, when it's time to let go, when it's time to stop, and when it's time to proceed. And those are such valuable impressions that people have. I think we're limited in so many ways because we don't recognize that we have this ability within our body, our mind, and our spirit all together. Yeah, I think meditation helps you get in touch with that bigger portion of consciousness, like we were just talking about, maybe a universal mind of some sort. And with meditation, you quiet the conscious level of mind where we're aware of our five senses just here in the physical world around us. We get so busy and we're so thought oriented all the time, and we get so many distractions. when you can quiet your mind, relax your body, get in touch with that inner part of yourself, whether you want to call that subconscious mind or you want to call it universal mind, whatever, it enables you to get those messages that normally you might be ignoring because you've quieted your system. Not only that, but meditation can also just help relax your system and help you cope with everyday life.
Relax your system. And leading up to this, can you talk more about some of the experience that you were having that you feel led you to follow your intuition more?
Yeah, there were many things. First of all, as a real estate investor, I began to know properties that we were probably going to purchase. And I had a sense of what those properties could be purchased for. So it eliminated a lot of the search at times as an investor to look at properties or make offers that were not going to be accepted, and enabled us to just hone in on the properties that we felt would be most valuable to us and that we would be able to actually purchase and move forward with. So that was good. Now, one of the more outstanding moments that really convinced me that things were beyond just a normal intuitive state. This is after I had developed my intuition pretty strong and I could get those messages back. There was a property, a rather large property. It was 222.22 acres. That somehow seemed important. And it was a 3-story home on this. It was a newer house. It had sold a couple of times before for close to $1 million. In this market today, it would be closer to $5 or $6 million in today's market. The house was going up for an auction, which was rare, but the man had gotten into some financial difficulties, and so he was going to have to sell the property. Normally, this type of property we felt would have been out of our budget at that time. This was back in the 90s. But we often would go to the open houses and just view properties. It was just something we did. It was a Sunday afternoon. We didn't have anything else to do, so we drove the hour away to just take a look at this estate. We got there and it was just picturesque. It was absolutely beautiful. It had these wonderful black wrought iron gates in the opening to the road that led up to the house. It was a beautiful hillside that went up a black paved road with trees on each side, and then this beautiful 3-story home set at the top of the hill. So we toured the house and then we decided to just drive around the property. This had been a horse ranch, and they had a bunch of horse arenas and buildings that housed horses on the property. So we just drove there was a path or a road through the property, and we were just driving around there. We got to a certain spot, and sometimes I would get what I call downloads, which is a kind of just moment of awareness that I would sometimes have intuitively. And at this point, there was this moment of awareness, and I just said the words, and I could totally agree with what I just said, but it came out very quickly. I said, this property will sell for $300,000, which was remarkably low for this property. And my husband looked at me and he said, if this sells for $300,000, we need to buy it. So we didn't have $300,000 sitting in the bank to just to have this, but at an auction, you need to have your money right away to close on the property. The auction was going to be in 3 weeks. So we didn't have a lot of time to put any kind of finances in place, but we did approach the bank. We got approved for a loan on the property, but we didn't even have the money for the down payment for this property. So it's like, what can we do? We had secured the loan, but we just didn't have the down payment. Within that week, and this was very strange, but we got calls from 2 different people, was not initiated by us. They called out of the blue. One man we didn't even know. He lived next door to a small Quonset hut garage that we owned. And he wanted to buy this little garage because it was next door to his house. And he had cash and he could close that week. The other person called about a storage facility we owned. He had looked at it about a year ago and decided he didn't want it. Now suddenly he decided he did want it. He had cash and could close within the week. And suddenly, with the closing of these 2 properties, we had the down payment we needed for this larger estate. So here we were, ready to go. We ended up at the auction that day, and this was a farming community because it was a horse ranch, and the whole community turned out. The place was absolutely packed. I could not believe how many people were there. So we're at the auction. Bid starts really low, and it's climbing up, and we finally jumped in at $300,000. We owned that bid for about 5 seconds when the auctioneers had sold, and we bought the house for $300,000. But if I had not had that intuitive download We would never have pursued getting the loan. We probably wouldn't even have gone to the auction, frankly. But because I had that intuitive impression, it enabled us to buy a property worth about $1 million for $300,000 at that point. That is one of the more outstanding properties I bought. But there were many times with properties that I knew what it would sell for. I knew we could buy the property. I would often get a feeling that I already owned the property before we even made offers. So that was one point where it was very clear. But there were so many ways that it could be used. I remember this one woman was asking, she was 40, she was a teacher, she'd never been married, but she was really wanting a relationship in her life. She casually asked me if I could see anything in her future that was a potential relationship. So I took a look at this for the woman, and I saw that there was a man, and I described what he looked like. He was a lean person, medium height, nice looking, shorter hair. I even described the type of clothing he wore. I could see that he was in close proximity to her often, but they had never met. Then I saw where he lived, and it was exactly 10 miles due south of her home. She lived in a desert area, so it was unusual for there to be trees. But where he lived, there was this grove of trees around this cluster of houses in this little subdivision where he lived. Had no idea if any of this was true or not, but it felt right in my body as I spoke it. Within a few months, she had joined a dance class, and it was a ballroom dance class. And there were several men, several women in this class, and she kind of met up with a partner and started dancing with him, and they got to know one another. And he did fit the description that I said, but a lot of people in dance classes might fit that description. It wasn't so specific that one wouldn't fit that description. But also I had seen that he worked in the computer field, and this guy did work in the computer field. They started talking, and she found out that his sister lived right across from the school where she taught. And every Wednesday evening, he would join his sister at her home for a dinner. So he was in close proximity to her often, but they'd never met. When they finally started dating and she finally went to his home, it was exactly 10 miles due south of her house, and it was in a grove of trees, just as I had seen. So oftentimes we can see things or know things that we don't give ourselves much credit for sometimes, but it can be very valuable in connecting with all sorts of things in our life, whether it be people in our life or business issues in our life. That's why I call my book S.P.I Your Way to Power and Success, because it's about being able to be aware of things that you're maybe not aware of right now and be able to create a life you want. And that doesn't always mean money, but it may mean something different, like a relationship or something else in your life that you're really wanting to do.
Yeah. No, that's an amazing story. And just following that intuition, being confident in it, accepting it, letting it sink in is what I'm thinking you call a download.
Yeah, the housing was a download. Oftentimes I would get those, and they would just come in out of the blue. We were driving down a highway, and I said, oh, there's a subdivision. We need to buy this subdivision of all of these rental properties. And we didn't know where it was exactly. The next day, my husband scanned the newspaper, and he saw this guy had 3 houses for sale. And he went to view it, and come to find out, it was an entire subdivision. This guy was moving out of state. He was going to move to Alaska. And he wanted to sell all of them, but he had only put 3 of them in the newspaper that day for sale under the real estate ads. So my husband called me, and he said, okay, this guy has something like 12 to 15 properties, and he wants to sell all of them. He's willing to owner finance them, and he really wants a quick sale. So it was a really decent price. He wants to move to Alaska quickly. So I took a look at it. We put the financing in place. We purchased the properties, and it was just a really wonderful thing. But I'm not sure we would have been aware that subdivision was there or even started looking for it the next day. But when I would have those downloads, my husband knew for us to be aware of that, because that was an opportunity sitting there for us to explore. I used to call it the silver platter of opportunity, because it would pop up. So the SPI technique that I teach is helping people get in touch with those opportunities that are sitting out there. Like the woman who had an opportunity to meet this man. And by the way, she did marry him, and they're happily married today. So those opportunities are often sitting out there, but we miss them so many times because we're not aware they're there.
That you're describing is something that I don't see anyone not wanting to experience and to be able to get in touch with within themselves. Meditation.
Meditation, listening to your dreams is another way. I
Yeah.
used to have dreams of properties, and then the next day we would go maybe to an open house or something, and I would realize, oh, I dreamed about this property the night before. And that was usually an indicator that we were going to buy it. Even the house I live in right now, I dreamed about it prior to purchasing it, but when I saw it, it's, oh, this is the house that I saw, and I knew I was going to own it. And within about a year and a half, I understood why. My mother had a stroke, and she came to live with me for around 9 months, and she was in a wheelchair. And the house that I was living in before would not have accommodated her wheelchair and her bed in my home, but the house that I dreamed about and purchased accommodated it beautifully. So it was just absolutely perfect, and it was all in place before she had her stroke. Now, I didn't have conscious awareness of that, but what I did know was I dreamed about this house, and I knew it was going to be my house and I would live in it.
Yeah, I did see some of the things that you said about dreams in it, and that spoke to me because being from Louisiana, originally a town where dreams mean something, state dreams mean something. That was really something that I wanted to talk more with you about because people dream. A lot of people ignore those dreams, but you're saying that dreams are a form of intuition that are telling you something about your life.
I think especially if you cultivate that. I did dream interpretation for a lot of years, and sometimes it's just regurgitating how you've processed information the day before. But by asking a question before going to sleep at night, oftentimes I would get an answer to that in a dream during the night. And so I think it's a matter of cultivating that the same way you cultivate your intuition through meditation or just opening up that ability to listen to those things that are trying to tell you. Once you open those doors and start communicating with those inner levels of yourself that have awareness, whether it just be something that you process consciously and it's sunk into your subconscious mind and now it's coming back, or whether it be something even beyond that, like the houses that I had not even seen before and I was dreaming about them. I always knew because there would be something there that would stand out. It was either a floor plan issue. The house I'm living in now, I remember thinking, oh, is this too close to the highway? But I didn't even know it was close to a highway. But I was concerned about that in the dream, actually. It isn't bad, but it is more noisy than the house I left. I still needed to be here because I was going to need this house for my mother to live with me.
And like you said, it's your way to power and success. So this worked out for you. Yeah, there are some things that you would change if you could, but overall, this is rewarding. Okay, so sorry about that. So with this, when I hear you talking about you helped create this union of marriage even, and you saw every detail, you're awake, right? But you saw these things. How much of this is genetics and how much of this is just the human experience?
In years past, I would have probably said that genetics didn't play that large of a role in it. But since I've written this book and worked with this physicist, I'm going to say genetics does probably play some role in it. The reason is because we concluded, it's just a theory at this time, that what we're working with is a torsion energy. But our DNA creates photons, biophotons, and those biophotons are light sources. And when someone is in a deep sense of concentration, or a very deep sense of connection with the kind of those inner parts of ourselves, we put off more of these biophotons. And biophotons creates a torqued energy called torsion energy. It was first discovered in the 1950s by a man who recognized the sun creates this torsion energy. The light from the sun coming out creates this torsion energy. And actually some countries have harnessed this energy and have patents with machinery that actually use it. So it's something that is valid, that we know. But this physicist friend of mine believes that this torsion energy is actually something the body produces. And that would be something that our DNA would indeed produce. Now, by and large, it has a lot to do with your strength and motivation and focus and concentration. And there again, I want to go back to the children in living situations where they feel they're in danger. they have motivation to protect themselves, high motivation to protect themselves. So they develop this kind of unique skill to be able to see things that they need to know. Is that person that's dangerous to them at the house right now? So this physicist friend of mine actually believes this torsion energy is what enables us. And that comes from our DNA. It's more powerful when we're motivated highly. I think this is why a lot of really successful people use that. I think they're very focused and concentrated on what they're trying to create in life. And so with that comes a greater sense of being able to see things or know things or recognize that intuition within their system. The information maybe just has the ability to come back to them more easily because they have more of this energy around them. I think anyone can develop more of this. Within the SPI technique, I give you a way that you can create this higher charged energy and create more of those biophotons through that deeper level of meditation concentration. But there's also some spinning of energies through the system, through the chakra system, to be able to create more of that so that you have a channel, basically, to communicate with that inner self more effectively. So I do think DNA does play into that.
What you said is there's, in your SPI technique, you talk about how to channel that even if you're not genetically prone to have that, accept that energy naturally or easily, because understandably, some people are more resistant to those positive feelings and things like that. So can you speak more to that?
Sure. Yeah. And I think that a lot of it, there again, I spoke about our biases. A lot of us believe we can't. And so because we believe we can't, we just limit what we actually end up doing. But also, so much of our life is programmed from a child up about what our limitations are. We're told we can't, and we can't, don't, whatever. And so people feel like either they shouldn't explore this or they can't because they don't have the skill set to do it or whatever. What I found is everyone has the ability to do it. Some people will probably be better at it than others, more natural at it. I'm not a particularly athletic person, but I do know if I'd spent my life working with learning to play tennis as much as I learned to do this, I would be a better tennis player today. So I think it's just a matter of devoting some of your time and attention to creating that focused mind. I know I worked with a school, a medical school, that was putting together a class. They already had the class, but this particular class wanted to utilize some of the techniques I was teaching. So we put together a focus and concentration, and it also dealt with sleep habits and just taking care of yourself mentally and emotionally so that you could be the best performing person possible on test taking. And it was something that they worked with throughout the duration of the last year that they were in this medical school program. This particular class that we worked with got the highest scores of any class across the country because they had developed a keener sense of utilizing focus and concentration and being able to get into what we refer to as the zone in test taking. So they could regurgitate the information that their subconscious mind definitely already knew because they'd been studying and knew this material. It was a matter of connecting that conscious and subconscious mind together so that would come out more effectively and more easily for them. So I think that with doing this intuitive work, a lot of it's just developing the skills that you already have or lazy about them. And so part of the development program that I put together for the SPI technique really is honing in on the capacity that your mind already has, but just fine-tuning it where you can get that information more clearly.
Oh yeah, so that's a really good thing is distinction in this process is that it's something that you already have, not to, let's say you think of something that just you've never done before. It's not really you. That's probably not what you want to pay attention to. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it's already within your physical system. Your body already has this ability to channel this information to you, your gut feelings and your intuition, and even take that to the point where their downloads are just knowing something more specifically. It just depends on how far you wish to take that piece of information. And meditation is also very natural. Some people get a little bit frightened about going into those quiet places inside of them, but every night when you sleep, you're in those deep states of mind. When you dream, you're in those deep states of mind. When you meditate, you're simply choosing to go there into those deep states of mind and have some awareness while you're there.
Yeah. So how much is support in this relevant to success?
It does matter. It matters if you have people that believe in you. Now, I started with this, and it was amazing to me that all the things that were happening to me happened to me most of my life. But even people who were skeptical couldn't question a lot of this after a time. My husband wasn't overly intuitive, but he saw so many things that happened. And then eventually, when I went into doing this more professionally, even teaching people and helping people be more aware, he would just ask me questions. He knew that I could access information that he didn't have privy to. So he would ask me about stocks to invest in. He would ask me, once I know he had this physical pain in his body, and he said, "What's going on here?" And I could see a swelling around his heart, but he had not had a heart attack, I didn't think. But I could see a swelling around his heart. Of course, we went ahead and went to the emergency room to see what was going on. He had lifted something way too heavy for himself that day. And I think he had pulled and strained, but it was the sac around the heart that was inflamed. It wasn't the heart. The heart was not damaged. It was the sac around the heart, and they could see it with ultrasound. But still, we needed to be in the emergency room to confirm that.
I'm thinking some people are going to say, sounds like psychic.
Yeah, psychic could be another word for this. I don't use that term because there's so much stigma around the term psychic. But yeah, knowing things in advance or knowing things that's not within the realm of your five senses is a very psychic process. I call it intuition because it's a more palatable reference word.
Okay. And from my understanding, you didn't have any of this during childhood.
It probably was there, but I wasn't acknowledging it very much. I remember having one dream as a younger person, and it was a scary dream. It was warning me that someone was going to behave very badly, not toward me, but just in my presence, and it was going to be scary. And that did come about. It did happen. So I felt like that dream was telling me. Now, I was married for about a year and a half early on in my life and got a divorce from that marriage, but during that time, my husband was having an affair most of that year of marriage. And we had been together for quite a while before we got married. So I had gone through a lot of summer vacations with him, but we were a couple before marrying. And this year, it was different. There was a way that his body language changed, and he seemed happier. He seemed like he was engaging with conversation about things with me that he had never engaged with me before. There was just a change, a difference. When summer vacation came, we didn't do the things we normally did. It seemed like he scooted out of the house really quickly, and we just didn't do a lot during that summer vacation. So I was processing all this information subconsciously and consciously as well. It was just telling me something is off, something is wrong, and I couldn't put my finger on it specifically. But I just really believed there was something going on with him that I could not totally understand. Eventually, I had a dream again of a person, and she was very attractive with big, beautiful, dark eyes and long, really long hair, dark hair. Eventually, I saw a coworker of his that fit this description, and I asked him, "Are you having an affair with this person?" Of course, he denied it at that time, but later on, I found out he was indeed having an affair with that very individual. So I was subconsciously and intuitively aware something was going on. And then I had the dream, and then that was the confirmation I needed that was happening. We divorced within about a year and a half. I think many people have that experience where they know something is off, they know something is wrong, but they can't put their finger on exactly why.
Now, I know a lot of people who experience similar things, but they can't put their finger on it. Yeah, so they don't entertain it.
So I think that we often, in my childhood, I didn't have a lot of this, but it was probably always there. I just wasn't paying a lot of attention to it. I think after that divorce, I started recognizing, oh, yeah, it is there, and I do have this. And then I began exploring that even more. And then when we went into the real estate business, Most definitely. It was so present so much of the time at that point.
Yeah. Okay. So what I hear is that when you have that experience and it works, that's a good idea to continue paying attention to that because you know how it feels at that point. You know how beneficial it can be to you. If you have that intuitive experience and it works out for you in your favor, I would say there's your opportunity to learn more about that feeling, like Linda says, to help you improve in areas that you want to improve. And Linda, we are getting towards the end here. There's a lot of great information that you have here. So do you want to talk about where is your book available, on what platforms?
Yeah, you can find my book on Amazon. If you just type in Linda Eastburn, you'll find all my books there on Amazon. My website is lindaeastburn.com, so you can find me there and you can communicate with me. There's contact information there. I do personal sessions for people if anyone's interested in that. Plus, I'm on Facebook. You can reach me through there. But you can also just email me at lindaeastburn@gmail.com.
Do you have any final words that you want to tell listeners?
The one thing is, I would encourage people to utilize that because it could really benefit you. You create the life that you really want, and not to hesitate or to negate that, but to just step out and take the risk and pursue it.
Amazing. And I received that. Thank you so much, Linda. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you the best. All right. Have a good day. Bye-bye.